Good afternoon, Chairman Natoli, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm Alan Asch here representing the Sacramento Chapter, the ACLU. I also came here last fall to speak to you before you voted on the county's realignment plan because I attended most of the CCP meetings that came up with the plan. And based on what I saw and heard at those CCP meetings, I came here last fall and asked you to vote against the part of the realignment plan that spent almost half the money on reopening the Roger Bauman facility at the RCCC. Along with others, I told you that opening that old expensive jail wasn't immediately necessary and that even just delaying the opening of the jail would save the county $700,000 per month, that we should spend on the evidence-based rehabilitation programs that everyone at the CCP agreed would increase public safety by reducing recidivism. But that's not what you decided to do last fall. Based on what sounded like scare tactics from the Sheriff's Department, 4 out of the 5 of you voted to spend the money on the Roger Bauman jail instead of the rehabilitation programs that actually help people. And as disappointing as that decision was last fall, what happened next was really outrageous. As you know by now, the Sheriff's Department delayed opening the Roger Bauman jail, just like a lot of us had asked, but instead of spending the money on helping people, the Sheriff's Department just spent all the money anyway. Now, I don't know if what the Sheriff's Department did is actually a violation of Penal Code Section 504, but I do know if what the Sheriff's Department, but I do know this board has to impose some kind of consequence on the Sheriff's Department if you want to say you're actually supervising anything. You need at least an audit investigating this unauthorized spending. After all, this criminal justice system is based on imposing consequences on those who don't follow the law, so it would be pretty hypocritical to let the sheriff violate the legally passed plan without any consequences. I mean, if I'm pulled over by the sheriff for speeding, should my defense be that the speed limit should be retroactively increased? Of course not. So please don't vote to just retroactively authorize the sheriff's unauthorized spending, or you really shouldn't be calling yourself supervisors anymore because you're not supervising. Now, I was pretty disillusioned with this process last year because it seemed that even though all the truth was on the side of the evidence-based programs that help people through rehabilitation, all the power was on the side of the Sheriff's Department. So I guess what I'm doing here is I'm here just to speak truth to power. And based on what I told you and lots of people told you about the Roger Bauman jail last fall, compared to what the Sheriff's Department told you, it seems the Sheriff's Department has all the power, but all the truth is on our side.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Okay, Kimberly.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Kimberly Horiuchi. I'm the Criminal Justice and Drug Policy Advocate for the American Civil Liberties Union, California. I won't belabor Mr. Asch's points, which I think are highly persuasive and effective, that if we'd made the right decisions a year ago, we may not be in the same situation today in terms of managing inmates. But if the board does see fit to move forward and approve the amendments currently proposed to the CCP, then I would ask you at the very least to, 1, increase the amount of funding that's going to be going to programs in the 2012-2013 budget by a coextensive amount. Whatever amount was increased for law enforcement or for the sheriffs, or at the very least was redirected in terms of flexibility, that you redirect those funds to services when you're negotiating the budget for the 2012-2013 year. As you know, that amount will be considerably increased. Sacramento County is particularly looking at $28 million. Hopefully a significant amount of that will go to things like pretrial services, inmate services, and evidence-based recidivism reduction, all of which can be parlayed into overall inmate reduction because you decrease the number of people returning. But moreover, I think it's critical to gather the appropriate data to make the most cost-effective solutions on the county level. Daily inmate population, staffing and inmate ratios, how inmates are classified. Some of these questions are particularly of value when you're evaluating the total number of bed space that's available. How many active beds? How many of those active beds are empty? That type of information can sort of give you a sense of where the population is, not just beyond, for instance, whether they're N 3 offenders, whether they're parolees, pretrial, or just county jail misdemeanants, but specifically focusing on how those individual classifications are staffed, what types of beds they're put in, how many reception beds are there, how many mental health beds are there. This is the type of information that the legislature gathers from CDCR in order to decide how best to provide funding for increased correction space if such space is needed. We would contend, obviously, that such space is not needed, as is evidenced by the delayed opening of the branch of the RCCC. But I think specifically if you focus on things like recidivism reduction programs, pretrial services, then you can reduce again the overall total population rather than focusing on trying to find ways to increase spacing. It's also critical that you ask yourselves whether you're using the beds you have effectively and you're using staff effectively. If it's truly $95 a day per inmate to house in the county jail, then you need to be asking what the cost drivers for that are. Is it staffing? Is it services? Is it education? Is it meals? Is it medical care? Whatever the particular cost drivers are, a fine analysis of where those funds are coming from, I think, will instruct the Board of Supervisors in deciding how best to move forward. But again, had we focused on the plans that were proposed by the American Civil Liberties Union last year, I think that you would see a considerably reduced inmate population now, and I encourage you to look at those goals as you move forward into the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Question for Mr. Ryan. The last two speakers accused the sheriff of violating the law, and I'm wondering if you have.
Well,
those were the words.
Those were the words. What happened in my is that a too specific plan got written and approved by the Board of Supervisors, and that this is an attempt to provide the flexibility that probably should have been written into the plan to begin with. And I think corrections